Very good morning to you. Welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Louise Minchin.
The headlines for you at 6 o'clock this morning.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown.
Personal attacks and feisty exchanges. Donald Trump and Joe Biden face off in their first presidential debate.
Millions tuned in overnight to watch the pair clash over COVID, taxes and even their own families.
There's new restrictions for more parts of Wales, and Northern Ireland introduces a curfew. Boris Johnson will update the public later.
Good morning. Could energy going green cost jobs as Shell moves from oil to renewable sources and assesses the impact of COVID? Could more redundancies be on the way?
Good morning. A dramatic penalty shootout with Tottenham emerging the victors. Chelsea missed the last spot kick to put Spurs through to the League Cup quarter-finals, increasing their fixture pile-up.
A yawning rabbit, a goat in a hammock and a dog, wait for it, that can walk on water. These are the contenders, some of them fighting for top place at the Comedy Pet Photography Awards.
Good morning from the Temperate House in Kew Gardens. Today, Kew's State of the World's Plants and Fungi report is released, and that shows that plant extinction rates may actually be higher than originally thought. We'll have some of those stats throughout the course of the programme, but the forecast is wet and windy weather already in the north and west. It's going to be spreading east through the course of the day. I'll have more details in 10 minutes.
So all that to come for you today. Wednesday, September the 30th. Let's bring you the top story. The US presidential candidates have taken part in their first televised debate. This is before next month's election.
Donald Trump and Joe Biden clashed over issues including coronavirus, race and the economy in a series of heated exchanges. Our Washington correspondent Gary O'Donoghue has the details.
It's the biggest moment of the election campaign so far. Toe-to-toe, face-to-face, the virtual sparring over, the time when the gloves come off. And it wasn't long before the insults started to fly.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
Despite the first subject being the vacant seat on the Supreme Court, much of the discussion centred on healthcare and whether the court could scrap the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden said the president wanted to take away healthcare from 20 million Americans. The president said he would do a great job on drug prices.
All of the things that we've done, insulin, I give you an example, insulin, it was destroying families, destroying people. The cost, I'm getting it for so cheap. It's like water, you want to know the truth. So cheap. Take a look at all of the drugs what we're doing, prescription drug prices. We're going to allow our governors now to go to other countries to buy drugs because they pay just a tiny fraction.
The COVID pandemic was always going to be central to this debate, and Joe Biden wasted no time in laying the blame for America's 7 million cases and 200,000 deaths at the president's door.
If we would have listened to you, the country would have been left wide open. Millions of people would have died, not 200,000, and one person is too much. It's China's fault. It should have never happened.
President Trump's taxes were bound to be a question, given claims he'd only paid $750 in federal income tax in his first year in office.
Millionaires and billionaires like him, in the middle of the COVID crisis, have done very well. Billionaires have made another $300 billion because of his profligate tax proposal, and he only focused on the market.
After months of protests following the killing of African Americans by police, the president has made law and order a central question in his campaign, arguing that the Democrats are anti-police.
You can't even say the word law enforcement, because if you say those words, you're going to lose all of your radical left supporters.
And then it all got really personal when the president began his much-anticipated attack on Joe Biden's children. The moderator interrupted, but the former vice president bit.
He was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes.
Really?
And I resent.
Are you talking about Hunter? Are you talking about Hunter?
I'm talking about my son, Beau Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know Beau. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter got thrown out of the military.
This was a thoroughly bad-tempered and chaotic affair. Both sides will claim a victory. Both sides will live to fight another day. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News, Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, let's get a bit more on that debate, which leads up to the presidential election at the start of November. From our Washington correspondent, Nomia Iqbal. Nomia, thank you very much for being on the programme with us today. So what do you think the American public will pick out of that? Who came out on top?
Well, not the American public, that's for sure. According to a lot of the US TV networks here, one high-profile news presenter used a swear word to sum up the debate. Obviously, I'm not going to use that word now. Another presenter described it as a dumpster fire. But look, we always knew that President Trump would be like this in a debate. We know his style. We just saw it there. And the Trump campaign team actually set a pretty low bar for Joe Biden. There were lots of baseless accusations made about his mental health and so forth, and he skipped over that bar, as we saw in the debate. But, Donald Trump still wants to portray himself as the outsider, but he has a record to defend. He's been president for 4 years. He still wants to show that Joe Biden is the ultimate career politician, having been in office for 47 years. But I think the big question is, does it change anything? Do people care about this debate? Well, if we look at the poll, CBS, 48% say that Biden won, 41% say Trump won. And I think that sums up how polarised this country is. Most people have made up their minds. Millions of people have already voted or continuing to vote due to early voting. And there are not a lot of undecideds left in this country, about 14%. We've obviously got 2 more debates to come, and I'm pretty sure we'll be seeing much of the same as we've seen this evening.
Nomia, thank you very much. That's Nomia Iqbal with the latest, live from Washington, D.C. on those presidential debates, as she said, the first of 3.
Yep, and we'll have a look at some more of the content of that debate a little bit later in the programme. Pubs, hotel bars and restaurants will have to shut at 11 p.m. in Northern Ireland under new rules for the hospitality sector there. The rules come into force from midnight tonight. First Minister Arlene Foster said there could be no exceptions to the rule, and it would also apply to weddings and other social events.
And Boris Johnson will hold a press conference this afternoon to update the public on the coronavirus pandemic.
Yep, it's happening ahead of new restrictions coming to force, as we just heard, in Northern Ireland, also North Wales as well. Let's speak now to our political correspondent, Helen Catt. Morning to you. So, what can we expect from the Prime Minister later today?
Well, I can tell you what it's not going to be about. So we know that it's not going to be about those restrictions in Northern Ireland or in Wales because, of course, the Westminster government sets the regulations for England only. And we're not expecting any drastic change or drastic announcement in those regulations to come out of this press conference. We know that the government in Westminster has been very keen to sort of let the rule of 6 that it announced bed in and see what the impact that, if there's been any impact from that. So the expectation, I think, is that we might just get an update on where the figures are and what, if any, impact there's been from those restrictions that were most recently introduced.
And also we know that there is a vote in the Commons later about regulations, isn't there?
Yes, this is the way back just as lockdown started. Parliament passed the Coronavirus Act, which gave the government these emergency powers to set some of those regulations. But at the time, there was concern among some MPs that it was handing over an awful lot of power over our lives directly to the government. So it was time limited. So each 6 months, the House of Commons has to vote to say, yes, we are happy for these restrictions to stay in place. That's the vote that's happening this afternoon. There's no suggestion that MPs will vote against that, so we expect that to pass. But what a group of MPs is doing is trying to use this as an opportunity to force the government to give them more say over any future coronavirus restrictions. There have been concerns, for example, about the fact that in England children aren't exempt from the rule of 6. There have been worries about that 10 p.m. curfew. So the technical way they're trying to do it in Parliament, there's some question about whether or not that will work. But what it's done is to lead to these sort of side chats, because a lot of Conservative MPs have signed up to back it, 50 of them. It's led to these sort of side chats between MPs and the government. And so we'll see later whether that has got the government to come to any sort of compromise with them.
OK, Helen Catt for the moment, thank you.
Now, a shipment of British beef will be exported to the United States today. That's the first of its kind since 1996. American authorities banned beef from the EU in the wake of the BSE outbreak, otherwise known, of course, as mad cow disease. But restrictions were lifted back in March. Ministers say the export was a historic moment for British farming.
A hydrogen-powered train has travelled on Britain's rail network for the first time ever, reaching speeds of up to 50 miles an hour.
It's called the Hydroflex. It's a prototype made a 25-mile round trip in Warwickshire, all producing zero emissions, would you believe? Our transport correspondent Tom Burridge was one of those on board.
A 20-mile hydrogen-powered round trip and a first for UK Rail.
Here we are, UK main line between Evesham and Long Marston, running on completely clean green electricity, hydrogen fuel cell and battery. It's a massive moment.
On board, hydrogen is mixed with oxygen to produce electricity to power the motors.
Having trains that can run on hydrogen power means they can run where there aren't overhead wires, there isn't electricity available. We can run trains that emit zero emissions.
This is a prototype, so its maximum speed is about 50 miles an hour. It takes most of a day to fill up its hydrogen tanks on board, and then it can travel about 100 miles.
Well, the challenge now is to get all of this equipment underneath the train so we can have passengers inside and run on the service.
The aim is for paying passengers to travel on trains like this one by the end of next year. The project has the government's backing.
The hope with this is to get it up to 200 miles at a normal line speed, and you know, getting all the infrastructure in place will be important.
And that's the broader challenge, having enough hydrogen available to power trains in the future and ensuring that the hydrogen itself is sourced in a sustainable way. Tom Burridge, BBC News in Warwickshire.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.